She is the mother I always wished I had, my son said, hugging his mother-in-law. The very next day, he discovered that I, too, know how to destroy in silence. If you've ever felt like your love was taken for granted, stay with me. Today, I am going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if you, for a single second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep letting this off my chest. It was an October afternoon in Manhattan, when the golden maple leaves were just beginning to carpet the sidewalks along the Upper West Side. I, Eleanor Vance, 67 years old, walked down the hallway of that modern townhouse, a house my son Ethan had bought largely thanks to the loan I gave him. Money I had saved for decades running a small flower stand near the Union Square Green Market. My hands, wrinkled and marked by years of labor, held a tray of homemade savory pastries I'd prepared since 5 that morning, as I did every Sunday since Ethan married Charlotte. The house smelled of new money, Italian furniture, German appliances, and that particular chilliness that only those who have never had to count coins for bread can afford. In the living room, decorated with abstract art that cost more than my annual pension, the whole family was gathered. My daughter-in-law, Charlotte, sleek as a magazine model, was chatting with her mother, Patricia Hawthorne, a 60-year-old woman dripping in gold jewelry and wearing a designer dress that screamed prosperity. Patricia had moved up to New York from Palm Beach 20 years ago, after being widowed by a textile entrepreneur who left her a considerable fortune. Her portfolio included properties in Miami, shares in the stock market, and a wealth that grew without her having to lift a finger. She always boasted of her investments, of how she had diversified her capital across real estate and hedge funds, while I continued to live in my modest 2-bedroom condo in Astoria, Queens, the same place where I raised my 3 children after my husband Robert died in a construction accident. The moment came when Ethan stood up from his Italian leather sofa, wine glass in hand, wine I had brought, because I never arrived at my son's house empty-handed. His eyes shone with that admiration he used to reserve for me, back when he was small and I was his entire world. "I want to make a toast," Ethan said, with that smile I'd known since he was 5, and drew hearts on paper napkins for me. "To Patricia. This woman is the mother I always wished I had." The silence that followed was deafening, not the comfortable silence of a family sharing a special moment, but the uncomfortable silence of witnessing a public execution. Everyone applauded. Charlotte with tears in her eyes, my other children, Mike and Lauren, with forced smiles. Even my granddaughter, Ava, 14, raised her glass of Coke without fully grasping what had just happened. But I understood perfectly. Sitting in that chair that creaked every time I moved, the only old chair in the entire house, as if they had deliberately reserved the most uncomfortable piece of furniture for the woman who had given everything to be there, I felt something break in my chest. It wasn't my heart. It was something deeper, more ancestral. It was the trust I had built over 42 years of motherhood, crumbling like a house of cards in the wind. Patricia smiled with that look women reserve for when they know they've won a battle. The other woman didn't even know she was fighting. "Oh, Ethan, the things you say," she replied, but her gaze sought mine directly. Although I must admit, it is nice to feel appreciated and valued by those who truly understand what one can bring to the family. Charlotte leaned in to hug her, adding, "Mom just has such positive, modern energy. Not like, well, you know, Eleanor, you're more old school, right? Old school. As if loving unconditionally were obsolete. As if sacrificing myself for decades was a dated methodology. As if those Sundays, rising before dawn to prepare their meals, were acts from a bygone era." "Of course," I said, with a calm I didn't feel. "I'm old school," Ethan continued. "Patricia understands my projects, Mom. When I told her about the Bitcoin investment, she immediately saw the potential. When I talked about diversifying into crypto, she gave me incredible advice. You never understood those things." It was true. I didn't understand Bitcoin or crypto. What I did understand was working 14-hour days so he could afford the most expensive private university in New York. What I did know was selling my wedding jewelry to pay for his MBA. What I was an expert in was going without dinner, so he had money for going out with his friends. But apparently, none of that mattered in the world of investments and financial assets. Besides, Charlotte continued, Patricia helped us with the down payment for the house. Without her capital contribution, we never would have been able to access this property. A lie. A lie as big as Grand Central Station. I had put down $50,000 for that house. $50,000 I had saved coin by coin over 30 years, selling flowers at the market, through the rain, through the sun, in the cold, in the heat, with arthritis in my hands and varicose veins in my legs. But of course, Patricia's money was investment, and mine was simply, what? A maternal obligation? Mike, my middle son, tried to change the subject. Okay, let's change the topic. Does anyone want more of Grandma's appetizers? Grandma. I wasn't even mom to my own children in front of their mother-in-law anymore. I was Grandma, as if my only function in the world was to be a decorative figure who contributed homemade food to family gatherings. The appetizers are delicious, Eleanor, Patricia said with that condescension that poisons praise. You have a great hand for traditional cooking. It's a shame today's gastronomy is so sophisticated. Lauren, my only daughter, finally spoke. Mom, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, times change. Patricia understands today's world. Today's world? At what point had a mother's love become obsolete? At what point had sacrificing oneself for one's children become less valuable than having a diversified investment portfolio? I rose from that uncomfortable chair with the dignity I had left. I took my purse, an old leather bag I had bought at a vintage shop in Hell's Kitchen 15 years ago, when I still believed money should be spent on durable things, not whims, and walked toward the door. Leaving already, Mom? Ethan asked, as if my presence were optional, as if I were just another guest who could depart when bored. Yes, I replied. I have things to do. What things? Charlotte asked with genuine curiosity, as if she couldn't imagine what activities a 67-year-old woman might have besides watching grandchildren or preparing meals for families who no longer valued her. Important things, I said, and I walked out of that house without looking back. The crisp Manhattan air hit my face like a slap of reality. I walked the streets of the Upper West Side while tears finally streamed down, mixing with the breeze sweeping in from the Hudson. I passed the historic brownstones I had admired for years, but now they seemed cold and pretentious, like the people I had just left behind. I arrived at my condo in Astoria, Queens, my 600-square-foot refuge where every object held a story, where every photograph on the wall marked an era when I was important to someone. I sat on my worn sofa in my small kitchen full of memories, and for the first time in 40 years, I allowed myself to hate the ingratitude, to hate the ease with which they had erased my existence, to hate how easy it had been for them to replace me with a newer, richer, more convenient version. But above all, I hated my own stupidity for believing that unconditional love was automatically reciprocated. That night, watching the lights of New York from my window, something changed in me forever. I was no longer the same Eleanor who had entered that house with homemade appetizers. I was a woman who had learned, at 67, that sometimes love must come with boundaries. And when those boundaries are absent, it's time to create them. The following days passed in a thick fog that refused to dissipate. I woke up every morning at 6, as I had for the past 40 years. But for the first time in decades, I had nowhere to go. I had sold the flower stand 3 years ago when Ethan convinced me it was time to enjoy retirement, promising he would cover my expenses if I needed help. What irony. Now I understood his generosity had been a form of control, a way to ensure I depended on him for everything. I stayed in the kitchen, making coffee just for myself, something I hadn't done in years, because I always cooked thinking of visits that might arrive, of children who might need something. The silence of my apartment had become deafening. The phone wasn't ringing, no messages arrived. I heard no keys turning in the lock. On Tuesday morning, while organizing the drawer where I kept family photos, I found a letter Robert had written shortly before he died. I had kept it tucked between the pages of my old cookbook, the same oil-stained, flour-dusted book that held all the recipes I had cooked for my children for decades. Eleanor. The letter read in the shaky handwriting he developed during his final months. If our children ever forget where they came from, remind them, not with words, but with actions. The money we worked so hard for is not to buy their love, it is to secure our respect. I reread those words again and again, sipping my cold coffee and looking out the window towards the distant glimpse of the Hellgate Bridge. Robert had always been wiser than me. He had worked construction for 30 years, rising before dawn, returning home with broken hands and an aching back, but he never complained. I work so our kids have a better future, he always said, but he never said he worked for them to despise us for not having enough. That same afternoon, Mike showed up at my door without warning. He looked the most like his father, both physically and in temperament. He was 38, worked as a telecom technician, and had always been the least troublesome son. But when I saw him standing on my threshold, with that gaze he couldn't hold, I knew he hadn't come by chance. "Hi, Mom," he said, giving me a kiss on the cheek that felt colder than usual. "Can I come in?" I served him coffee and some cookies I had baked out of habit, though I no longer knew for whom I was making them. Mike sat on the sofa where he had watched television throughout his adolescence, where he had studied for exams, where he had cried after breaking up with his first girlfriend. "Mom, we need to talk," he began, avoiding eye contact. "About what happened Sunday." "What happened Sunday?" I asked, though I knew perfectly well what he meant. "Don't make this harder. You know Ethan felt bad about what he said, but you also have to understand that, well, things change." "Things change? What things? A mother's love for her children? Basic gratitude for sacrifices made? Fundamental respect for the person who gave you life? Explain to me what things change, Mike." He shifted uncomfortably on the couch, like when he was a child and had to confess a transgression. "Look, Mom, Patricia brings things to the family that you can't bring. She has contacts. She knows about investments. She understands the business world. Ethan is trying to expand his digital marketing firm, and she's helping him with capital and connections. Capital, connections, investments. It all boiled down to that. My son was explaining to me, with the patience you reserve for a child, that I had been replaced by someone more economically useful. And the $50,000 I put down for his house? That doesn't count as capital? Mike sighed, as if my question were naive. "Mom, that was years ago. And besides, it was your obligation as a mother. Patricia has no obligation to us, but she helps anyway. It's different. Obligation. My sacrifice had been downgraded to an obligation, like paying taxes or washing dishes. Something expected, taken for granted, undeserving of special recognition. So everything I did for 40 years was an obligation? Don't say that. You know we love you. But you have to accept that Patricia has a special place in the family now. She and Ethan are planning a business together. They're creating an investment fund focused on tech startups. Charlotte is going to handle the legal side. It's an incredible opportunity. An investment fund. Tech startups. My family had evolved to a level of financial sophistication where I no longer belonged. I had become obsolete, like a rotary phone in a world of smartphones. And what place do I have in those plans? Mike finally looked me in the eyes, and I saw a mixture of pity and exasperation. "Mom, you are our mother. You will always be our mother. But you can't expect life to revolve around you forever. You have to accept there are other important people in our lives. Other important people. As if the problem were my inability to share. My selfishness for wanting to maintain some relevance in the lives I had helped build. All right," I said with a calm that surprised me. "I understand perfectly." Mike looked relieved, as if he had managed to solve a complicated problem. "I'm glad you understand, Mom. I knew you'd be reasonable. Ethan wanted to come talk to you, but he's really busy with the business preparations. Next week they're meeting with some millionaire investors from San Francisco, and—" "Mike," I interrupted him, "can you do me a favor?" "Sure, Mom. Anything you need. Can you call your brother and tell him I need to speak with him urgently about some papers?" "What papers?" "The house papers. His and some other important documents. Tell him it's urgent, that it has to do with inheritances and properties. The word inheritance had the effect I expected. Mike straightened up immediately, with that attention reserved only for matters that could affect the family estate. Is everything okay, Mom? Do you have a legal issue? Just tell him to come. Tomorrow at 5 in the afternoon. And to bring Charlotte, too. It's important that both of them are here. After Mike left, I sat in my kitchen, looking at the photographs scattered across the table. Photos of birthdays, Christmases, graduations. In all of them, I appeared, smiling, hugging my children, cooking for them, celebrating their achievements as if they were my own. But Patricia Hawthorne was in none of those photos. She had participated in none of those memories. All those moments had been built with my time, my energy, my money, my unconditional love. And now it turned out that all of that was worth less than an investment portfolio and some business contacts. That night, I took out the box where I kept all the important documents: property deeds, insurance policies, certificates of deposit, and above all, the will I had drafted 5 years ago, when I still believed my children would always see me as their priority. In that will, all my assets, the condo in Astoria, the savings I had accumulated over decades, even the few pieces of jewelry I had left, were destined to be divided equally among my 3 children. It was a modest estate, but it represented a lifetime of work and sacrifice. As I read the document by the kitchen lamplight, I thought of Robert's words: "The money is not to buy their love. It is to secure our respect." Perhaps it was time for my children to learn the difference. The next day, I put on my best suit, the same one I had worn for Ethan's wedding, the one I saved for special occasions. I carefully styled my hair and put on the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. At 5 o'clock sharp, Ethan and Charlotte rang the bell. I saw them from the window. Him in his designer suit, her with her branded handbag that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. They came with the attitude of someone fulfilling an annoying but necessary errand. When I opened the door, Ethan gave me a routine kiss on the cheek. "Hi, Mom. Mike said you needed to talk about some papers. Is everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," I replied. "Please come in." I made coffee. They sat on the sofa with that familiarity of those who believe they have the right to be anywhere, anytime. Charlotte glanced around with that condescending smile she always wore when visiting my home, as if she were touring a museum of old objects. "What papers are we talking about, Mom?" Ethan asked, checking his watch as if he had more important places to be. I placed the coffee cups on the table and sat facing them. I pulled the will from a folder and placed it between us. "These papers," I said calmly, "I wanted you to know that I've decided to make some significant changes." Ethan and Charlotte exchanged a quick look. For the first time since they arrived, I had their full attention. "What kind of changes?" Charlotte asked, using the controlled voice she reserved for when something worried her but she didn't want to show it. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment. It felt strange to have their complete attention after years of feeling invisible. I've been reflecting on many things lately. About family, about the future, about the legacy I want to leave. Ethan leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Mom, I hope you haven't made any rash decisions. I know Sunday was awkward, but..." "Awkward?" I repeated the word slowly. "That's an interesting way to describe the moment your son tells you another woman is the mother he always wished he had." The silence that followed was dense, like the fog that sometimes envelops the Brooklyn Bridge on winter mornings. Ethan lowered his gaze, while Charlotte shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Mom, I didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter what you meant," I interrupted. "What matters is what you said, and what you said has made me understand many things." I pulled a sheet of paper from the folder. It was a copy of my bank statement, clearly showing the deposits I had made over the years to help them with various expenses. The down payment for the house, Charlotte's car, the loan for Ethan's office equipment, even the money for their honeymoon in the Maldives. "According to my calculations," I said, adjusting the reading glasses I only used for small numbers, "in the last 10 years, I have given or loaned you exactly $120,000. Charlotte paled visibly. Ethan tried to maintain his composure, but I saw the muscles in his neck tense. "Mom, all that money, We always told you to consider it an investment in our future. When the business takes off, we'll obviously pay you back. When exactly will that be? I asked, with the patience of someone who has waited too long for an answer that never arrives. Well, with Patricia's new project, we expect that in 2 or 3 years we can— 2 or 3 years, I repeated. And meanwhile, I remain the outdated mother, the one from the old school, the one who doesn't understand the modern world. Charlotte tried to smooth things over. Eleanor, no one said you're outdated. It's just that, well, generations are different. We grew up in a more globalized, connected world. We understand the dynamics of the financial market in a way that maybe what? That I'm too stupid to understand that I'm being used? The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Ethan nervously rose from the sofa. Mom, that's not fair. No one is using you. We're family. We help each other. Mutually? I also stood up, walking toward the window that overlooked the interior courtyard. Explain to me, Ethan. When have you helped me? I help you constantly. I drive you to the doctor when you need it. I accompany you for heavy shopping. You drive me to the doctor when you have no other choice, and always complaining that you missed an important meeting. And I've done the shopping alone for years, because you're always too busy. I turned to face them directly. Do you know the last time you asked me how I was feeling? When was the last time you came to visit me just because you wanted to see me, without needing something? Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but the words didn't come out. Charlotte looked toward the door, as if calculating how long it would take her to escape the conversation. And now, I continued, it turns out that Patricia, a woman who has known my son for 3 years, understands what he needs better than I do. A woman who never stayed up when he had a fever, who never worked overtime to pay for his education, who never gave up anything for him, is a better mother than I am. Mom, it's not a competition. Of course, it's a competition, I exploded, releasing the anger I had been accumulating for days. And according to you, I lost it. I lost because I don't have a diversified stock portfolio, because I don't understand Bitcoin, because my money is maternal obligation, and hers is smart investment. Charlotte's phone rang at that moment. She looked at it and her face lit up. It's Mom, she told Ethan. It must be about tomorrow's meeting with the investors. She answered the phone without apologizing, without asking permission. Hello, Mom. Yes, we're with Eleanor. No, everything's fine. Are the contracts ready? Perfect. Yes, tomorrow at 10. Kisses. She hung up and looked at me as if nothing had happened. Sorry, that was important. Important. More important than the conversation we were having. More important than the feelings of the woman who had financed part of her comfortable life. I see what the priorities are, I said with a surprising calm. Ethan tried to salvage the situation. Mom, I understand you feel displaced, but I don't feel displaced, Ethan. I am displaced. And I've decided to accept it. They both visibly relaxed, as if the problem had been resolved by my apparent resignation. I'm glad you see it that way, Mom. I knew you would be understanding. I returned to my spot at the table and placed my hands on the will. Yes, I am very understanding. So much so that I've decided to make some adjustments to my will to reflect this new family reality. The atmosphere changed instantly. Ethan sat down again, his full attention fixed on my words. Charlotte put away her phone and looked at me directly for the first time in the entire conversation. What kind of adjustments? Ethan asked, trying to sound casual but failing completely. Well, I've thought a lot about what you and Mike told me. That things change, that there are other important people in your lives, that I should accept that my role in the family has evolved. Charlotte bit her lower lip, a gesture she made when she was nervous but trying to appear calm. And I've concluded that you are right. You no longer need me as you once did. You have Patricia for the important things. The business, the investments, the contacts. I am only useful for the basics. The food, the occasional favor, an infrequent financial handout. Mom, that's not— Let me finish, I said, raising my hand. I've decided that my estate should go to people who truly value me, who understand the sacrifice it took to accumulate every dollar of these savings. I pulled another paper from the folder. It was a draft of the new will I had begun to prepare. My grandchildren, for example. Ava, Peter, Little Sophia. They call me Grandma with affection. They are happy when they see me. They still hug me as if my love means something. Ethan went completely pale. Are you saying you're going to disinherit your children? I am saying I am going to ensure that my inheritance goes to people who respect me. And you have clearly demonstrated that respect is not something you have for me. Charlotte rose abruptly. Eleanor, this is ridiculous. You can't punish Ethan for an unfortunate conversation. We all said things we shouldn't have. We all? I stared at her. When did you say something you shouldn't have, Charlotte? When did you apologize for calling me old school? When did you acknowledge that maybe you had been unfair to me? She didn't answer. She had no answer. And it's not just an unfortunate conversation, I continued. It's years of feeling progressively less important in the lives I helped build. Years of seeing my opinion matter less, my feelings matter less, my presence tolerated rather than celebrated. Ethan approached me with that look he wore as a child when he had broken something and tried to prevent me from getting angry. Mom, if you change the will because of this, you're going to destroy the family. Is that what you want? Revenge? I don't want revenge, Ethan. I want respect. And if I can't have it in life, at least I'll have it after I'm gone. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock, the distant noise of traffic outside, even my own breathing. Finally, Charlotte spoke. What do you want us to do, Eleanor? Tell us what you want. It was the first time in years someone in my family had asked me what I wanted. The first time my opinion seemed important to the decisions being made. I want you to treat me like what I am, your mother. Not a maid, not a personal bank, not a relic of the past. I want you to value what I did for you, not minimize it by comparing me to other people. Ethan nodded quickly. Yes, Mom, of course. All that is going to change. It's going to change? I repeated. How exactly is it going to change? Charlotte and Ethan looked at each other, like two students trying to find the correct answer on a test they hadn't studied for. But I no longer had patience for empty promises. It was time for them to learn that the consequences of their actions could be permanent. The promise of change lasted exactly 4 days. Friday morning, while having coffee on my balcony watching neighbors head to work, I received a call from Lauren. My youngest, who worked as a nurse at Mount Sinai, had that tense voice she used when she was genuinely worried. Mom, I need to talk to you. I can stop by after my shift, around 3. Has something happened? I'd rather talk in person. When she arrived that afternoon, she wore the serious expression she inherited from her father, trying not to worry me unnecessarily. She sat in the same chair Mike had been in days ago. But unlike him, Lauren looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, Ethan called me last night. He told me about the will. Of course. He had, naturally. He had probably called all his contacts, including Patricia, to seek allies in his new battle to preserve his inheritance. And what exactly did he tell you? That you're going through an emotional crisis, that you feel abandoned, and that you've threatened to disinherit all of us. Emotional crisis. As if recognizing my own value were a symptom of mental illness. That's his version of events? Lauren sighed, removing her nursing uniform jacket. Mom, I wasn't at that family dinner. I didn't see what happened. But I know Ethan, and I know he sometimes speaks without thinking. But to completely change the will, do you also think I'm exaggerating? I think you're hurt, and you have the right to be. But I also think Ethan loves you, in his clumsy way. And Charlotte, well, Charlotte is Charlotte. She's never been particularly warm to anyone. I got up to pour more coffee. I needed to move my hands so I wouldn't scream. Lauren had always been the most diplomatic of my children, the one who tried to mediate family conflicts. But her diplomacy, which I once viewed as a virtue, now sounded like complicity. Lauren, let me ask you something. When was the last time Ethan borrowed money from you? What does that have to do with... Answer the question. She shifted uncomfortably in the chair. Last year, for the equipment for his new office. But he paid me back in 6 months, as he promised. And Mike? Also last year. $5,000 for the down payment on Pilar's new car. And when have they ever loaned you anything? The silence that followed was eloquent. Lauren lowered her gaze to her coffee cup, as if the answers were written on the bottom of the porcelain. That's different, Mom. I have a stable job. I don't need. Don't need what? Didn't you need your family's support when you decided to divorce Carlos? Didn't you need help when you were left alone with Sophia and had to pay rent and daycare on a single salary? You helped me then, and I am very grateful. No, Lauren, I helped you. Your brothers were too busy with their own problems to realize their sister was struggling. She got up and walked to the window, looking out at the street as if she wanted to escape the conversation. What do you want me to do, Mom? Fight with my brothers? Divide the family? I want you to stop defending the indefensible. I want you to recognize that there is a pattern here, and that pattern includes the fact that your mother has been treated like an employee who also pays to work. When Lauren turned to look at me, I saw tears in her eyes. You're right, Mom. You're right about everything. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't brave. I'm sorry I didn't defend you when I should have. For a moment, I thought I had finally gotten someone to understand, that I would finally have an ally in my own family. But then her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. Did you talk sense into Mom yet? Could you make her see reason? Lauren read the message in front of me, without trying to hide it, and I saw her expression change, how the guilt she had shown seconds before transformed into something more pragmatic. Mom, can you give me a little more time? Let me talk to Ethan and Mike. Let me try to make them understand what they did wrong. Give the family a chance to fix things before you make a final decision. Again they asked for patience. Again, they asked me to wait while they decided whether I deserved respect or not. How much time, Lauren? A couple of weeks. A month maximum. And in the meantime, what? Do I pretend nothing happened? Do I go back to preparing their Sunday meals as if I were an automaton programmed to serve? Just give the family time to process this, to understand what they've lost. There was that word again, family. As if it were something sacred that stood above individual dignity, as if sharing blood justified any mistreatment, any abuse, any lack of respect. After Lauren left, I remained seated in my kitchen, looking at the will still on the table. It was a page and a half of legal text that summarized 40 years of work, saving, and sacrifice. 2 apartments, this one in Astoria and a small condo in Cape May, NJ, which I had bought as an investment, a savings account with $70,000, and some jewelry that had belonged to my mother. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented security. It represented the difference between a dignified old age and a dependent one, and my children knew it. That night, while preparing a simple dinner for one, the phone rang. It was Ava, my 14-year-old granddaughter, Ethan's daughter. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Is it true that Dad and Mom made you feel bad last Sunday? I paused, surprised by the question. Who told you that? I heard them talking on the phone with Grandma Patricia. Dad was really nervous. He said you'd threatened not to leave us anything in the inheritance. My own granddaughter had overheard her father discussing my threat with the woman he had called the mother he always wished he had. And what do you think about that, Ava? I think if they made you feel bad, they have to apologize. And not just with words, with actions. She was 14 and understood something that adults in their 40s could not grasp. You know what, Grandma? On Sunday, when Dad said that about Grandma Patricia, I felt really bad for you. I wanted to say something, but Mom signaled me to shut up. Charlotte had taught my granddaughter to be complicit in my humiliation. But now that I know you're sad, I want you to know something. You are my real grandma, the one who taught me to bake, the one who tells me stories about when you were young, the one who always asks me how school is going. Grandma Patricia is rich and fancy, but she's never asked me what I like to read. That conversation with Ava changed something fundamental in me. It made me realize that the battle was not just for my present dignity, but for the kind of family my grandchildren would inherit. A family where money bought love, where usefulness determined a person's value, or a family where respect and gratitude were values taught by example. The next day, I called the attorney who had drafted my original will. I requested an appointment for that same week. It was time to stop threatening and start acting. Mr. Jenkins's law office smelled of old wood and sealed paper, that aroma found only in places where important decisions are finalized. I sat across from his mahogany desk, the same one where 5 years ago I had drafted my original will with the naive belief that my children would always see me as their priority. Mrs. Vance, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed my documents, I understand you want to make substantial modifications to your will. Are you sure about this decision? Completely sure. I must warn you that such drastic changes can generate severe family conflicts. In my experience, decisions made in moments of emotional pain are sometimes regretted later. I explained the situation with the same coolness with which he warned me about the legal consequences. I told him about the public humiliation, about the years of financial exploitation disguised as family help, about the ease with which they had decided I was expendable. I understand your position, he finally said. We will proceed as you wish. Do you want to completely exclude your children or establish some form of condition? That question made me pause. I could disinherit them entirely, but that would turn them into victims of my cruelty. It was better to give them a chance to show if they could truly change. I want to establish very specific conditions, I told him. If they comply, they inherit. If not, everything goes to my grandchildren in a trust until they turn 25. We spent 2 hours designing a document that was essentially a contract of respect. My children could inherit my estate only if they met a series of requirements over the next 2 years. Weekly visits without asking for anything in return, regular phone calls to inquire about my well-being, inclusion in important family decisions, and, most crucially, public apologies for the treatment I had received. If any of them fail to meet these conditions, I explained, their share is automatically redistributed among the grandchildren. It's innovative, the lawyer admitted, but legally solid. 3 days later, I summoned my 3 children to my house for a family meeting. The message I sent was simple. I have something important to communicate to you. Come prepared to listen. They arrived together, which confirmed they had been coordinating their strategy. Ethan brought flowers, the first he had given me in years. Mike carried a bottle of my favorite wine, and Lauren carried artisan chocolates from an expensive boutique downtown. They sat in my living room with that forced smile people wear when trying to show they are making a special effort. Charlotte had not come, which was a statement in itself. Mom, Ethan began softly, we want to apologize for what happened last Sunday. I spoke poorly, I was insensitive, and I understand I hurt you deeply. Mike nodded vigorously. We've all reflected on our behavior, Mom, and we realize we haven't given you the place you deserve in our lives. Lauren added, we want you to know we value everything you've done for us, and we are going to make an effort to show you better. They were the words I had waited years to hear, but they came too late, and under circumstances that made them sound more like strategy than genuine repentance. I appreciate your apologies, I said calmly, but words are easy when there's an inheritance at stake. Ethan straightened in his seat. Mom, this has nothing to do with money. It has to do with family. Really? I pulled a folder from the side table. Because according to my calculations, since I threatened to change the will, I have received more attention from you than in the last 2 years combined. I showed them a sheet where I had meticulously noted every contact they had had with me in recent weeks, compared to the previous year. In 2023, Ethan visited me 4 times without asking for money or favors. Mike, 3 times. Lauren, 6 times. In the 2 weeks since our conversation about the will, you have come or called 16 times combined. Mike shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we may have been careless, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. Do you know why I decided to do this? I continued. It wasn't out of anger. It was for clarity. I could finally see our relationship without the filters of maternal love that had blinded me for years. I pulled the new will from the folder. I've already signed it. It's already in effect. But it includes something you might be interested in knowing. All 3 leaned forward simultaneously, like puppets pulled by the same string. It establishes very specific conditions under which you can inherit. If you fulfill them over the next 2 years, you will receive your full inheritance. If you do not comply, everything goes directly to your children. Ethan paled. What kind of conditions? Conditions that any loving child would naturally fulfill, without the need for legal documents to force them. I read them the complete list. Weekly visits of at least 1 hour, without mentioning financial problems or asking for favors. Phone calls every 3 days just to check on me. Inclusion in important family celebrations. Not as an obligation, but as a guest of honor. And the most important condition, public apologies, in front of the same people who had witnessed my humiliation. At the next family gathering with Patricia, I said, looking directly at Ethan, you will say you were wrong, that I am indeed the mother you always wished you had, and that you regret seeking that affection elsewhere. Mom, that's humiliating. For whom? For you. Can you imagine how humiliating it was for me to hear those words spoken aloud in front of the whole family? Lauren tried to negotiate. Couldn't we do this more privately, without involving Patricia? No. She heard when I was denigrated. She has to hear when I am vindicated, if you truly want to do so. Mike stood up and began pacing the living room. This is emotional blackmail, Mom. No, Mike. Emotional blackmail is what you have been doing to me for years. Using my love to gain economic advantage, using my maternal guilt to secure favors, using my fear of abandonment to keep me quiet when you disrespected me. But we're your family, Ethan insisted. You shouldn't need contracts for us to love you. You're right, I replied. I shouldn't need them. The fact that I do is exactly the problem. They fell silent for several minutes. I could see them mentally calculating. 2 years of mandatory visits and phone calls versus the loss of an inheritance they had probably been counting on to finance their future projects. What if we can't come 1 week? Ethan asked. My work is very demanding. I travel constantly. The will includes provisions for real emergencies, illnesses, unavoidable work trips. But it also includes a very clear clause. 3 unjustified absences in 1 year, and you automatically lose your right to the inheritance. Lauren approached me with tears in her eyes. Mom, do you really think we need threats to love you? I don't think so, Lauren. I know so. Because I spent years waiting for you to love me without threats, and it didn't work. Ethan rose abruptly. This is absurd. I'm not going to live like an employee who has to punch a clock to keep their job. Perfect, I said calmly. It's your decision. Ava, Peter, and Sophia will thank you very much for that choice when they turn 25. The mention of his children stopped him dead in his tracks. He turned around slowly. Are you using our children as a weapon? I'm making sure my grandchildren learn something you never learned, that love and respect go hand in hand, that family is not an excuse for mistreatment, that gratitude is not optional. Mike sat back down, defeated. Are you really willing to destroy the family for this? I'm not destroying anything, Mike. I'm establishing the terms under which this family can continue to exist. If those terms seem impossible to meet, then perhaps we were never truly family. Perhaps we were just an economic transaction disguised as affection. The silence that followed was absolute. My 3 children looked at each other, communicating without words, calculating costs and benefits as if they were in a corporate meeting. Finally, Lauren spoke. I accept the conditions. Mike slowly nodded. Me too. All eyes turned to Ethan. He was the one who had the most to lose, but also the most pride to swallow. Fine, he finally said. But let it be clear. I'm doing this for my children, not because I believe this is right. The facts are what matter, not the motivations, I replied. Time will tell if this becomes something real or if you are simply going through the motions. After they left, I stayed in my living room looking at the flowers Ethan had brought. They were beautiful, but I couldn't help wondering how long it would be before I received flowers again, without a threatened inheritance involved. For the first time in years, however, I had hope. Not hope that they would change out of love, but hope that the change, regardless of the initial motivation, might eventually become authentic. And if not, at least my grandchildren would grow up knowing their grandmother had fought for her dignity until the very end. The first few weeks of the new family regime were like watching a poorly rehearsed play. My children arrived promptly for their scheduled visits, but with the stiffness of someone fulfilling a work obligation. Ethan showed up Tuesdays at 6, Mike Thursdays at 7, Lauren Sundays after her hospital shift. Their conversations sounded forced, as if they had studied a manual on how to talk to your mother. How are you feeling today, Mom? Ethan would ask every Tuesday, sitting in the same armchair with the same rigid posture. Need anything from the grocery store? Mike would offer every Thursday, checking his watch every 10 minutes. Have you been out for a walk this week? Lauren would inquire every Sunday, while discreetly checking her texts. It was like having visits from insurance representatives who feigned personal interest to sell their policies. But at least they came. At least they complied. The first truly revealing event came 3 weeks later, when Charlotte organized another family dinner. This time, the invitation arrived with a special note. Eleanor, we hope you can attend. It will be at our house, at 8. We hope you can attend. As if I were an optional guest, not the family matriarch. I arrived promptly, dressed in my best suit and carrying a platter of homemade cannelloni I had prepared earlier. Patricia was already there, wearing a sleek designer dress that likely cost more than my monthly Social Security check, chatting animatedly with Charlotte about the latest trends in the real estate market. Eleanor, so glad you could make it. Charlotte greeted me with that 5-star hotel receptionist smile. I sat in the same uncomfortable chair as always, watching the family dynamic unfold exactly as before. Patricia occupied the central role in the conversation, dispensing advice on investing in index funds and strategies for diversifying portfolios. My children listened to her with that reverent attention they once paid me when I told them stories of their childhood. Elvira is considering investing in a short-term rental project in Tampa, Charlotte explained. The projected returns are exceptional. It's a unique opportunity, Patricia added. I'm evaluating allocating part of my liquid capital to these types of real estate assets. The post-pandemic tourist market is showing an impressive recovery. Ethan nodded as if he understood every word of the financial jargon. We are also exploring similar opportunities. With the new business, we hope to generate enough cash flow to diversify our investments. I listened for an hour as they planned a future full of prosperity, without anyone mentioning where the initial capital had come from that allowed them to dream of these multi-million-dollar projects, without anyone acknowledging that my life savings had been the first step of their financial pyramid. Finally, after dessert, a cake bought at an expensive downtown bakery, because apparently my homemade cannelloni were no longer sophisticated enough for these occasions. The moment I had been waiting for arrived. Ethan stood up with his glass of wine, exactly as he had done weeks ago. But this time, his expression was different. There wasn't that genuine admiration he had shown for Patricia. There was, instead, the resignation of someone about to fulfill a promise they would prefer to forget. I want to make a toast, he announced, his voice less firm than the time before. Patricia smiled, surely expecting another declaration of filial affection. To my mother, Ethan continued, looking directly at me. To Eleanor Vance, who is and always has been the mother I wished I had. I was wrong a few weeks ago when I suggested otherwise, and I want to publicly apologize for that lack of respect. The silence that followed was different from that first dinner. It wasn't the complicit silence of those witnessing humiliation, but the awkward silence of those who don't know how to react to an unexpected situation. Patricia lowered her glass without drinking, a smile frozen on her lips like butter exposed to the cold. What a noble gesture, she finally murmured. Charlotte looked alternately at her husband and her mother, as if watching a slow-motion car crash. I also toast, Mike quickly added, raising his glass, to a mother who has given us everything, even when we didn't deserve it. Lauren joined the toast with tears in her eyes. To Mom, who is teaching us that true love includes boundaries and respect. We drank in silence. I savored that moment not out of vengeance, but for the strange satisfaction of seeing my children acknowledge, even if under duress, the value of what they had been disregarding. Patricia excused herself early that night, citing a sudden migraine. After she left, the atmosphere noticeably relaxed, as if we could all finally breathe without the weight of that forced performance. Are you happy now? Charlotte asked me while clearing the dishes, a tone she couldn't quite mask her resentment with. I am satisfied, I replied, which is different from being happy. What is the difference? Being happy would be if this had come from you, spontaneously, out of love. Being satisfied is knowing that you now at least understand there are consequences for disrespecting the person who gave you life. Ethan approached me before I left. Mom, I hope you know this is very difficult for me, feeling like I have to act according to a script to maintain a relationship with you. And how do you think I felt for years? Acting according to the script of the perfect mother who gives everything and asks nothing in return. He had no answer for that. The following weeks established a strange but functional rhythm. My children religiously kept their scheduled visits. The phone calls arrived promptly. And gradually, something shifted. I don't know if it was simply the habit of spending time with me without a hidden agenda, or if they finally had the opportunity to know me as a person, not just a provider of maternal services. Mike started telling me about his problems at work, not to ask for money, but because he needed to vent to someone. Lauren began bringing Sophia to our visits, and my 8-year-old granddaughter filled my condo with energy I had forgotten existed. Even Ethan, though still the most reluctant, occasionally stayed longer than required, especially when we talked about his professional plans. You know, you never asked me what I thought about your projects, I told him one afternoon as we had coffee on my balcony. I never thought you'd be interested. They are very technical, very modern. Ethan, I ran a flower stand near Union Square for 20 years. I know what it's like to manage inventory, deal with difficult suppliers, calculate profit margins, handle demanding customers. Maybe I don't understand crypto, but I understand business. For the first time in years, he explained his digital marketing firm in detail. He told me about his clients, the difficulties in scaling the business, and his plans to expand to other East Coast cities. You're right, he finally admitted. We should have included you in these conversations a long time ago. It's not about including me out of obligation, I explained. It's about recognizing that I have something to contribute beyond money and homemade food. But the true turning point came 2 months after the new will, when Ethan showed up at my door unannounced on a Tuesday night, outside his scheduled time. He came without flowers, without gifts, without a visible agenda. He simply wanted to talk. Mom, Charlotte and I are having problems, he confessed, sinking into my sofa with that defeated posture I had seen in him as a child when something overwhelmed him. What kind of problems? Financial, mainly. The business isn't growing as fast as we hoped. Patricia pulled her investment last week, right after the dinner where I had to apologize to you. There it was. Patricia's revenge had been silent but effective. Seeing she had lost her privileged position in the family, she had withdrawn her financial support. And what are you going to do? I don't know. Charlotte is furious with me. She says that by defending your ego, we lost a golden opportunity, that I should have kept pretending Patricia was more important than you. And what do you think? Ethan was silent for several minutes, looking out the window at the Manhattan lights. I think I maybe lost sight of what's actually important. Patricia had money, but you raised me. You were there when I had pneumonia at 10. You worked double shifts to pay for my college. You never abandoned me, even when I abandoned you. For the first time since I signed the new will, I felt something akin to genuine hope. What do you need from me, Ethan? I need you to forgive me. Truly, not because of the will. I need you to help me remember who I am when I'm not trying to impress people who only value me for what I can give them. That night, for the first time in years, my son and I had a real conversation. Without hidden transactions, without financial agendas, without the pressure of meeting unreal expectations. We talked until very late, and when he finally left, I hugged him at the door like I used to when he was little. I love you, Mom, he said, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The following months were like watching a plant grow after an especially harsh winter. Slow, but noticeable. Ethan began visiting me not just on scheduled Tuesdays, but also on weekends, bringing Ava and Peter to spend time with me. Charlotte, although maintaining some distance, had stopped making sarcastic comments about my conditions. Mike, who had always been the most dependable but least communicative son, began to open up in surprising ways. One April afternoon, while helping to fix a stubborn kitchen cabinet door, he confessed something he had never shared. Mom, for years I felt like I had to compete with Ethan for your attention. He was always more successful, more ambitious, and I thought you loved him more because he could give you things I couldn't. What kind of things? Status, pride, the possibility of boasting that your son was a successful entrepreneur. I'm just a technician, Mom. I fix equipment, I solve everyday problems. I never thought that was enough for you. I sat on a kitchen chair, watching my 38-year-old son speak like the insecure child he once was. Mike, do you remember when you were 12 and the washing machine broke? Vaguely. I didn't have the money to repair it, much less buy a new one. You stayed all afternoon taking it apart, reading manuals you borrowed from the library until you managed to fix it. That night, when it finally worked, I thought, this child has a special gift. Mike stopped working on the cabinet and looked at me. You never told me that. I showed you in 1,000 ways. Every time something broke in the house, I trusted you to fix it. Every time the neighbors had electrical issues, I told them, my son Mike can help you. But I never told you in words how proud I was. Why not? Because I thought you knew. Because I believed love was understood without explanation. I was wrong. That conversation changed something fundamental between us. Mike began to tell me about his work with a passion he had never shown before. He explained the technical problems he solved, the difficult clients he managed to satisfy, the complex projects he completed. For the first time, I understood that my son wasn't just a technician, but a respected professional who solved problems others couldn't. You know what's most ironic? He told me one afternoon. Ethan always talks about strategy and innovation, but when his IT system fails, he calls me. When Patricia had problems with her new smart TV, she asked me to come help her. Everyone needs what I do, but no one considers it important until they desperately need it. Exactly like being a mother, I observed. Mike smiled. Exactly like being a mother. Lauren, meanwhile, had begun including me in aspects of her life she had kept private for years. One May afternoon, she arrived earlier than usual, Sophia by the hand and a worried expression. Mom, can I ask you for advice? Always. It's about Carlos. He wants to come back. He says he's changed, that he realized what he lost. Sophia gets excited every time he calls. But I don't know if I can trust him again. Carlos had been Lauren's husband for 8 years, before his gambling addiction destroyed their marriage. He had lost the family savings at online casinos, repeatedly lied about his debts, and finally abandoned Lauren when she refused to keep funding his self-destruction. What does your gut tell you? My gut tells me to be careful. But Sophia keeps asking when Dad is coming home, and I feel very alone sometimes, Mom. Raising a girl alone, working double shifts, coming home exhausted with no one to share the day with. Lauren, what would truly make you happy? The question caught her by surprise. Happy? Yes. Not safe, not responsible, not practical. Happy, she thought for several minutes. It would make me happy to have a partner who valued me, who saw what I do as a nurse, what I do as a mother, and respected it, who didn't see me as a source of income or a solution to their problems. Did Carlos make you feel that way? No, never. Not even at the beginning. Then you have your answer. Lauren slowly nodded. You know what you taught me with this whole will thing, Mom? That sometimes we have to set boundaries even with the people we love. That love without respect is unsustainable. And what does that mean for your situation with Carlos? It means that if he wants to come back, he will have to prove he has genuinely changed. Not with words, but with actions. For a long time, with no guarantees from me. That afternoon, Lauren called Carlos and set very specific conditions for any potential reconciliation, therapy for his addiction, stable employment for at least a year, and a gradual process of rebuilding trust that included strict limits regarding money and family decisions. If he accepts, perfect. If not, at least I'll know I made the right decision, she told me. Carlos didn't accept. He disappeared again, this time without drama or broken promises. Lauren cried that night, but it was the cleansing cry of someone finally freed from a burden she shouldn't have carried. The true moment of transformation arrived in June, during Ava's birthday. Ethan organized a party in Central Park and insisted that I be the guest of honor. I want my daughter to see that her grandmother is the most important person in this family, he told me when he invited me. The party was small but cheerful. My 3 children were there with their families, some of Ava's friends, and to my surprise, several of my old customers from the Union Square Green Market, whom Ethan had invited without telling me. Eleanor, greeted Maria, a woman who had bought flowers from me for 15 years. Your children told us how proud they are of you, that you have an inspiring story of overcoming struggle and resilience. I looked at Ethan in surprise. I told them everything you did for us, he explained, about how you worked for years to give us what we needed, about how you raised 3 kids alone after Dad died, about how you never complained, never asked for help, never made us feel like we were a burden. We also told them about the will, Mike added, about how you taught us that respect isn't optional, even in family. Weren't you embarrassed to admit you had to be legally forced to respect your mother? At first, yes, Lauren admitted. But then we realized it was a story about second chances, about how it's never too late to correct serious mistakes. During the party, I observed something I hadn't seen in years, my children talking about me with genuine pride, not feigned, not forced by the will's conditions, but real. They told people about my work at the market, about my ability to stretch $1 into a full meal, about my patience in teaching them values they had forgotten but were now rediscovering. Ava, who was now 15, asked me to tell her stories about when her father was little. She sat beside me on a blanket on the grass, surrounded by her friends, while I recalled Ethan's adventures that he had completely forgotten. Grandma, is it true that Dad once got lost at Macy's and you found him in the video game section, 3 hours later, completely happy testing games? It's true. And when I scolded him for wandering off, he said, "But Mom, I was doing market research for my future." Everyone laughed, including Ethan. "He was an entrepreneur even back then," commented one of Ava's friends. "No," Ethan corrected. "Even back then, he was a boy who knew his mom would always find him no matter where he got lost." That sentence struck me in a way I hadn't expected, because it summarized something fundamental. Throughout all those years of conflict, my children never doubted that I would be there. They had taken my unconditional love for granted, and that had made them careless with it. But now, for the first time, they understood that even unconditional love has limits, and that crossing those limits can have permanent consequences. That night, after everyone left, I was alone in my house with a feeling I hadn't experienced in decades. The feeling of being valued by those who mattered most in my life. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was the end of the previous version of that story. The woman who had entered her son's house carrying homemade appetizers and hoping for crumbs of affection no longer existed. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth and who had taught her family to value her equally. 18 months have passed since I signed that will that changed everything. This morning, as I make coffee in my Astoria kitchen, I hear Ethan's keys in the front door. He no longer rings the bell. He has a key again, like in the old days. But now he comes because he wants to be here, not because he needs something from me. "Morning, Mom," he says, giving me a kiss on the cheek that feels real, not perfunctory. "How did you sleep?" "Like a queen," I reply, and it's true. Ethan pours himself coffee and sits at the kitchen table where he only used to appear when there were financial crises to solve. Now he comes almost every morning before work, simply to start the day with me. It's a ritual neither of us mentions, but which both of us value. "Charlotte wants to invite you for dinner Friday," he tells me. "She's making paella. She says she wants to learn your secret recipe." Charlotte took longer than the others to accept the new family dynamic, but she had gradually found her place in it. The turning point came when she found out she was pregnant with their 3rd child, and without thinking, called me first, before her own mother. "I have no secrets in the kitchen," I tell Ethan. "Just patience and love. 2 ingredients you can't buy at the market." That's exactly what I told her. And she replied, "Then I'll have to learn from the expert." Mike shows up half an hour later, like most mornings. He works close to my neighborhood now, having changed companies to be nearer the family. He brings toasted bagels and orange marmalade, our ritual breakfast. "You know what I was thinking yesterday?" he says while spreading marmalade on his bagel. "That for years I believed being successful meant moving away from where you came from. I thought progress was leaving the past behind, including family. And what do you believe now?" "Now I believe true success is being able to return home with gratitude, not shame. It's being able to say, 'This formed me, these people made me who I am, and I'm proud of it.'" Lauren arrives shortly after Mike leaves for work. Saturdays are her day off from the hospital, and she has started a new tradition. We have breakfast together while Sophia draws at the living room table. My 9-year-old granddaughter has developed a special talent for drawing portraits, and her favorite subject is me. "Grandma, can you stay very still?" Sophia asks me from the living room. "I'm drawing your hands." My hands, wrinkled, stained by age, marked by decades of labor. But to my granddaughter, they are worthy of art. "Mom," Lauren tells me softly, "yesterday Sophia asked me if she could ever be like you when she grows up. What did you tell her?" "I told her I hoped she would be better than me, braver, more willing to defend herself, more aware of her own worth." "And what did she say?" "She said, 'I want to be like Grandma Eleanor. She wants people to respect her, and when they don't, she teaches them how.'" That sentence fills me with a satisfaction I didn't know existed. My granddaughter doesn't see me as a victim who finally fought back, but as a strong woman who set her terms and made them stick. "Lauren, do you ever regret supporting me in all of this?" "Regret? Mom, you gave me the most important lesson of my life, that teaching people to treat you well isn't selfishness, it's emotional survival." The phone rings as we finish breakfast. It's Patricia. Over the last few months, we have developed a cordial, though distant, relationship. She understood that her strategy to replace me had failed, and I understood that her influence over my family had only been possible because I had allowed my place to be vacant. "Eleanor, I wanted to apologize again for my behavior last year," she says with a humility I hadn't heard before. "I had no right to interfere in the relationship between you and your children. Patricia, we've talked about this. No hard feelings. Even so, I wanted you to know that I admire what you did. You had the courage to reclaim your place when many women our age simply accept being marginalized." After hanging up, I reflect on that conversation. Patricia wasn't evil. She had simply filled a void that existed in my family. The problem had never been her. It had been my own willingness to become invisible to avoid conflict. In the afternoon, while reading on my balcony, an unexpected visitor arrives. My neighbor, Helen, a 70-year-old woman who lives in the apartment downstairs. "Eleanor, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. How did you get your children to value you again? I have the same problem you had. My children only call when they need something, visit out of obligation, and I feel invisible in my own family." The question makes me reflect on the entire journey. It's not a simple story with a happy ending, but a story about the price of recovering lost dignity. "Helen, the first thing you have to understand is that you can't change other people. You can only change how you react to their behavior." "But how? I don't have an inheritance to threaten. My estate is minimal." "It's not about money, Helen. It's about consequences. It's about ceasing to be automatically available to those who don't value you. It's about teaching people that your time, your energy, and your love have worth." I explain that the inheritance had only been a tool, but the true transformation began when I decided to value myself, when I stopped begging for attention and started demanding respect. "Weren't you afraid of losing them forever?" "Very afraid, but I realized I had already lost them. The difference was that now, if they returned, it would be on my terms." Helen leaves that afternoon with a thoughtful expression and a new determination in her eyes. As evening falls, while preparing a simple dinner for one, the doorbell rings. It's Ethan, Mike, and Lauren together, carrying grocery bags and a bottle of wine. "We decided to have dinner with you tonight," Ethan announces. "No special occasion, just because we felt like it." "We brought everything," Mike adds. "You just have to sit down and let us spoil you. And tell us stories from when we were kids," Lauren says. "Ava specifically asked me to ask about the time Ethan decided he wanted to be a chef and almost burned down the kitchen. As my children prepare dinner in my kitchen, I sit on the sofa watching them. Ethan chops vegetables with the same concentration he put into his school assignments. Mike fixes the toaster that had been failing for weeks, without me asking. Lauren sets the table using the good china, not the everyday dishes. It's a simple domestic scene, but loaded with meaning. They are not here out of obligation. They are not meeting a schedule. They are not checking a box on their list of filial duties. They are here because they want to be here. "Mom," Ethan tells me from the kitchen, "you know what I like most about these last few months?" "What?" "That I finally know you as a person. not just to function. I know you like to read historical fiction, that you prefer strong coffee, that your favorite movie is Casablanca, that you have a very smart opinion on international politics. For years, I only saw you as mom, as if you were just a role you fulfilled for us. It's funny, Mike adds, because now that we treat you like a complete person, you're a better mother than ever. It's not that I'm a better mother, I explain. It's that now I'm a mother by choice, not by obligation. And that difference is noticeable in everything. We ate until late, talking about everything and nothing. We planned summer vacation. They're renting a house in Cape Cod and insist that I be the guest of honor. We discussed politics, books, the changes in New York. For the first time in decades, I don't feel like I have to watch my words to avoid upsetting anyone. When they leave that night, after helping to wash the dishes and tidy the kitchen, each one gives me a kiss that feels real, not performative. Thank you for not giving up on us, Lauren tells me at the door. Thank you for teaching us that you deserved more than we were giving you, Mike adds. Thank you for being strong enough to make us change, Ethan concludes. After they leave, I sit on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the lights of New York spread out to the water. I think of the woman I was 2 years ago, invisible, taken for granted, begging for crumbs of affection from her own children. And I think of the woman I am now, respected, valued, included in the lives I helped create. It wasn't an easy change. There were moments of doubt, loneliness, fear of having gone too far. But every tear, every night of uncertainty, every day of resisting the temptation to return to the comfort of invisibility was worth it. Because now, when my children tell me they love me, I believe them. Because now, when I spend time with them, it is quality time, not service time. Because now, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who respects herself and who has taught others to respect her too. Tomorrow, Helen will probably come ask me more details about how to start her own transformation. I will tell her the same thing I have told myself these last few months. It's never too late to teach people how to treat you. And if anyone listening to this story identifies with it, if someone recognizes themselves in that invisible woman I was, I want to ask you something. Have you experienced something like this? Or do you know someone who has? Tell me about it in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, leave me a like and subscribe to the channel, because maybe someone else needs to hear that their dignity is non-negotiable and that it's never too late to claim the place you deserve in your own life.